What's up, Guardians? Haterade here, and in today's video we're going to be talking about Void 3.0, the Sentinel Titan, and taking the best of Void into Season 17. In Season 16, the revamp to Void subclasses, along with the powerful seasonal mods that favored this change, brought the Sentinel to the forefront of options for a majority of Titans. This change may shift in Season 17 as a new subclass rework is in the mix. But for those who want to remain true to the Sentinel and pledge their allegiance to the bubble in an ever-shifting meta, I've got you covered. We'll break down what's going away once Season of the Risen comes to a close, and how to replicate or replace that in future seasons. On top of that, we're going to pair it with an exotic that lets you double down on survivability. Without further ado, let's get into it. To start, let's take a look at the Sentinel subclass, its abilities, and the aspects and fragments that are going to carry you into next season. For the purposes of this build breakdown, you're going to want to focus on lowering cooldowns of certain abilities over others to play into your overshield. In saying that, your Rally Barricade has the lowest cooldown of the two options. So with speed on our side, we're going to focus on that as it has a base cooldown of 32 seconds compared to the Towering Barricade's 40 seconds. It's important to note that this is with max resilience after the recent nerf to Bastion. Shield Bash will be your best friend, as it will be one of two ways to activate your Void Overshield. And Vortex Grenades are my go-to choice, as they are arguably the best grenade at being able to both crowd control and deal damage. Onto the aspects, and this is where you see the build start to take form. Bastion and its Void Overshield that kicks in after placing your barricade is a staple of most Sentinel builds, and this is no exception. Now, the Bastion recently got a nerf that brought the cooldown time more in line with the Warlock Rift. However, later in this video, I'll show you how to completely negate that nerf so you can go about throwing down your barricade and getting overshields like nothing ever happened. Aspect number 2 for this setup is Offensive Bulwark, giving us a reduced cooldown for our grenades whenever we have an overshield or are inside a Ward of Dawn. This aspect also increases melee range and damage when you have an overshield, and gives you an extended timer on your overshield for melee defeats when it's active. TLDR, get a Void Overshield, reduce your grenade cooldown, and punch everything in sight. For fragments, we'll only have 3 slots, and this is where we bring some of the benefits of Season 16's artifact mods into future seasons. With Echo of Instability, defeats with your grenades will give you volatile rounds for 10 seconds. Now, this isn't quite as strong as the 18 seconds of volatile rounds you get from the seasonal mod, but will still allow you to use them moving forward. With Echo of Persistence, your Void Overshield will have an extended duration, which equates to having a longer period of reduced grenade cooldown, and pairs nicely with the ability to extend your Overshield with Offensive Bulwark. Lastly, Echo of Expulsion lets you mimic the initial explosion from the controlled demolition aspect by causing targets to explode with Void ability kills. We've talked plenty already about Overshields, but how do these play into the exotic we'll be using for today's build? Well, look no further, because we're going to take Wormcrutch away from hunters and slap it on our Titan, thanks to Crest of Alpha Lupi. With its intrinsic perk Survival Well, Crest of Alpha Lupi generates an additional orb of power from supers, aka your bubble in this case, and releases a healing pulse when your barricade is activated. That means not only will you receive an immediate full overshield when casting your barricade, but will also receive a small bump in health, giving you that extra leg up in the survivability department. Even if you just cast it to your side or into a nearby wall as an oh snap moment almost kills you, you'll be able to break away from an engagement and regroup. Lastly, we'll talk about the mods that will keep this build up and running and ensure that you have non-stop barricades. You can probably guess where this is going if you've seen some previous Void builds of mine, but wait, there's an extra twist at the end. This build relies heavily on Elemental Well mods and a few handy stasis elemental mods. With Bountiful Wells, you'll create an additional Elemental Well for each type of well mods you have equipped. Even if you only have one of a singular type of Elemental Well mod equipped, you'll now create 2 Elemental Wells instead of 1. Pairing this with Reaping Wellmaker allows you to create Void Elemental Wells for your first enemy defeated after using your barricade, which will be all the time. Feeding even more into the Elemental Well mods is Melee Wellmaker, paired with 2 Focusing Strike mods, which grant class ability energy whenever you inflict damage with your melee attack. You can see now how the ability combo of melee and barricades will supply each other with energy while your grenade receives its cooldown reduction from the aspects and fragments in the build, in addition to picking up these Elemental Wells. Lastly, and arguably the most important mods for this build that help ensure the lowest cooldown time for your barricade are the Stasis class item mods, Utility Kickstart. What this mod does is refund a portion of your class ability energy when using your class ability, much like the grenade and melee kickstart found on Stasis Gauntlets. All of these mods synergize to bring your barricade cooldown to the lowest it can possibly be, that's 23 seconds, without picking up an Elemental Well to even further reduce its cooldown. With the so-called Season of the Void coming to a close, it's been interesting to see how powerful and varied a lot of these Sentinel builds have become. A majority of them seem to focus on ability synergy to push them to the next level, to showcase both their strengths and weaknesses. A majority of them, this build included, rely heavily on the need to get defeats, or at minimum, inflict damage with abilities in order to chain the others. While that isn't necessarily a bad thing, it can have some serious drawbacks in endgame activities if not prioritized. By heavily relying on abilities to push the other's usage forward, many arguments will be made for Heart of Inmost Light to remain top dog when it comes to spamming these abilities. However, taking a step back and looking at the additional benefits you can receive from an exotic like Crest of Alpha Lupi can make these builds even stronger. I'll be interested to see what kind of sandbox changes come into play in Season 17 and forward that allow for builds like this to be tuned even more to create the most lethal version possible. For now, the Sentinel will remain a top choice for me, as I don't see it going anywhere. That's it for today's video. I'm done. I'm out. I'll see y'all in the next one.